particular position match what you're looking for as a potential employee. Okay, I remember having someone come to Virginia Tech to explore going to graduate school in our department. This was many years ago, before I had folks like Dr. Samini here who were doing research in these areas, and they said, you know, I want to do cancer research. I was like, we really don't have anybody in our department who's doing that. Now we have people we can send them to, but 20 years ago, you know, that was not the case. It wasn't a good match. And another person comes to interview for graduate school and asked them why they were interested in a PhD, and they said, well, I missed the deadline for the MCATs, and I didn't want to waste a year. That is not someone who had the right motivation, okay? They want to see, are you responsible, are you reliable, and will you interact well with others? That's really, really big. Teamwork and team players. And so half the game is you as a technically trained, knowledgeable person, but half the game is whether you have complementary skills, good communication skills, ability to work in teams, a good sense of ethics, cultural and global awareness, organizational skills, so that you can be a part of a team that's synergistic and complementary, best case scenario, and not absolutely disruptive, which is the absolute worst case scenario, where someone actually decreases the overall productivity of a unit because of the way they affect the people around them. Career building and graduate school are going to take a radical change in how you go about things. We've done something terrible to you guys, starting when you were 5 years old, which is that we have presented you with this idea that choices are defined, that the world works by these nice exact rules, right? What is it? You take 15 credit hours, you've got a full schedule. You get 70% right, you pass. You accumulate 120 credit hours, you get a degree, right? Are you in the right room? You look and see the people around, and if they're familiar, you know you're in the right room. So it is totally non-individual, it is totally exact. The real world does not work that way. The real world lacks step-by-step roadmaps. It lacks clearly defined choices. You don't get a menu. You go, well, what are my choices? It's like someone may make some suggestions, but only you define how big or how small the menu is, okay? And one of the nice things about school is you get second chances and feedback. When you apply for a job, you get told no or yes. That's it. No one says, well, you know, in your interview, you did this. Here are some pointers about what you might do differently. No, the world basically says, you know, thank you for applying, you know, a really strong resume, but, you know, we've gone in some other direction. So you're out of this follow the pack mode, you're out of this exact roadmap, and now you're in a place where you are going to have to function as an individual. You're going to have to show initiative and effort. You're going to have to plan. You're going to have to reflect on who you are and what your experiences teach you about you, as well as about your choices. So you're going to have to seek out options, which you did applying to this program. You took initiative and generate opportunities. How did you get your rotations? Did you kind of bang on people's doors or email them or something?
Email them?
Yeah, see? You had to go and create those choices. No one came and, you know, professor on their knees and said, you know, please rotate in my lab, right? No. You had to do something. You've got to continually revise, refine, modify, reflect, and you've got to persist. The Statistics are, if you put out 100 job applications, how many interviews on average are you going to get? Any guesses? 15%? 50? No. It's like 2 to 5 on average. Well, yeah, but I mean, part of this is hard work, and this is effort, and you can't be easily discouraged. So this is an inexact process, an empirical process. There are things you can do to bias the odds in your favor, but every situation is unique because you're a human being and the people making these choices are human beings. And so it's impossible to exactly map out what the rules of the game are, okay? Things that can influence the outcome: timing, right place, right time, people's perspectives, having connections. Networking is huge. How many jobs in the United States, how many people found the job they're in by answering an ad? Any guesses? You can guess again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump down on you. 30%. Most jobs in this country, most job seekers learn about an opportunity through some sort of connection, through a friend, through a colleague, through something else. Okay, so those of you who network are going to be in a much stronger position than those of you who do not. Communication skills are vital. Do you know what we hired people to do in this society, in a capitalist society? Anybody want to guess? Work? What kind of work? Who's been to Kroger's or the Food Lion? Okay? Who's done self-checkout? Why is, when I started going to Kroger's, there was no self-checkout. We hire human beings to do those things for which we have not invented a machine. Period. You are a commodity, which means you've got to sell that commodity. You've got to be able to articulate what your strengths are, what your assets are. You've got to be able to communicate that. Okay? But in general, proactive approach will yield more choices and more positive outcomes. This is a dynamic, a lifelong process. You're going to change over time. Marriage, children, just interests. The field is going to change. Nowadays, they tell you you're going to change jobs an average of how many times? 3? Ooh, nope. 5? Close. 7. So 5 plus 3 together, you guys got the right number. Right? Because what happens? Merger happens, and what always happens when they merge two things together? They start firing people, right? Things like that. So one of the things you have to be conscious of is the minute you take a new position, you're preparing for the next one. Okay, who here is a sports fan? Anybody? Any football fans? So, anybody who who knows who Kirk Cousins is? He's the quarterback for the Washington, D.C. professional team. And what do they predict is going to happen next year for Kirk Cousins? He's going to be a free agent, right? And they predict he's going to make like $30 million a year, some huge amount of money, because he's a quarterback. Anybody aware of any free agent punters that are going to get $30 million a year? You know, the punters are generally working for the league minimum and stuff. You need to be preparing for your next position from day one. The cool thing about this is preparing, making yourself desirable and marketable for your next position is entirely congruent with doing a good job where you're at. Because even if you don't change institutions, maybe you want a raise, maybe you want a promotion, and the people who get the biggest raises are the ones who are most desirable in free agency, the quarterbacks, not the punters. Yeah, if there's demand for you on the outside, then I am going to give you a nicer office as a department head. I am going to give you a bigger salary recommendation increase. Maybe I'm going to be more receptive when you say, you know, really, instead of this class with 300 students, I'd like to teach this class with 10. You know, I'm much more motivated to consider that seriously because you're marketable. But for the person who's not marketable, you know, the pressure's off. And so being marketable prepares you for the upheavals in the job market, but it also means you position yourself to command the best raises, to command good promotions, et cetera, et cetera. The key to this is mature self-assessment. This is the one that most people forget. What's the quickest way to get someplace? Geometrically speaking. Straight line. What do you need for that straight line? 2 points, right? So you need to know, you think a lot about where the arrow is, right? Places you might want to be, but you don't really think much about where you are, who you are, and what you are. And if you don't do that, it's hard to define the path to get there. You really need to look at the resume you want to have in 5 years and the resume you do have and go, okay, I need to work on X. You need both of those points to make things work. And you need to do this in a mature way. That means my Aunt Winifred, for 40 years, when I would come, back home for Christmas, would say, Peter, have you lost weight? 40 years. If she had been right, lovely woman, I wouldn't be here now. I would have, evaporated. Nothing. So you can't be, just, oh, I'm wonderful, and everything's great and the sky's the limit. But at the same time, you can't beat yourself up and go, oh, I'm terrible, nobody will ever want me, everyone's better than me, terrible. You have to find that happy medium where you accept what your strengths are and build on them, you accept what your weaknesses are and either improve on them or figure out ways to work around them, to exploit your strengths to make up for your weaknesses. For example, I'm from Chicago. I have been a Chicago Bulls fan since their 1967. I'm sorry, no matter how hard I work, I will never play for the Chicago Bulls. Okay, it's just, I have to accept that fact. And so you guys are talking about graduate school in the next step in career building. All those things about initiative and individuality are important. And also, graduate school is not about putting in time. Sit in the classroom, get 70%, move to the next classroom, get 70%, and just kind of skate by. Graduate school is like a health club. Basically, it's not enough to simply join. You actually have to do the work, right? You've got to make commitment. You need to do things the right way. You need to put in a consistent effort. You need to focus on your goals. And the thing to understand is that science and engineering are not dogmas. They're not memorize this book. Okay? They are dynamic things. Science is a set of principles and tools we use to understand the physical, tangible, measurable world. Engineering is a set of principles and tools we use to solve problems and do new things. So what you're training in is in principles and tools, not what is the fourth enzyme in the glycolytic pathway. Okay? What if I said, I will give $100 to the person who can draw the structures of the most amino acids in the next 10 minutes? Right? No, that's not what it's about, right? I'm not sure. So you need to focus on that, what is durable and translatable. So you're going to build knowledge and skills, things that translate, that are applicable, that allow you to adapt and grow. People are going to ask you when they interview you what you can do, not what your grade point average was, not even what your major was in many ways. So you need to focus from memorization to comprehension, retention, application in your training. Because individual techniques obsolesce, especially in science these days, rapidly. There were no cell phones. Everybody had landlines when I was a college student. When I was a high school student, I used a slide rule. They were just starting pocket calculators. And they could do things like add, subtract, multiply, divide, and the percent. And, you know, that was it. I didn't see a personal computer until I was through graduate school, 1985. You've got to be able to understand things that are pervasive and enduring. Focus on skills, focus on fundamentals. You will take courses in graduate school, but the big thing is you are going to do a project, a thesis project. And how fast you do it and how well you do it is going to determine when you're going to get out. And so when you think about where do you want to go to graduate school, you need to think about the fact that this experience is going to take place under the guidance of a mentor. So finding schools with a set of potential mentors that you find really attractive, really interesting, is the most important thing in deciding between Virginia Tech or UVA, for example. They're both good schools, right? But why would you prefer one over the other? It's because there are some people who are doing some really cool things at Virginia Tech that you're really interested in. You don't see very many people who are doing things that click with you there. And you need to have multiple people because when you show up, first of all, maybe the other graduate students also are just, wanting to work with Dr. Samini. And 5 of them are going to put her down as their first choice. And she's going to have to pick only 1 or 2. Or, when you meet Dr. Smith, you find out that even though he's a really cool webpage and does really great work, that he, clubs baby seals when he's on vacation. He's a horrible human being, and you don't want to work with him, right? So you want to have choices, 3, 4, 5, more choices, so that the odds are you're going to end up with somebody who's a really good match for you. And so when you arrive there, first year of graduate school is the most hectic, insane year of your life. It's like first year of a marriage. It's stressful and unusual and intense. The only thing that makes it sane is that there's some other people going through it with you. And you need to understand that this is something that you've got to really put a high priority on. And if you do that, then you're set up for the rest of your graduate career. If you don't, you get the leftovers and you'll end up in my lab, okay? You're looking at people, you want it to be someone who you respect. This is someone you are going to consciously or unconsciously model yourself after. They need to be someone with whom you communicate well. You're going to have to see, does their style work well for you? Okay? Some people, it's like, the boss hasn't said anything to me for 3 days. What's going on? Horrible, horrible. And, for me, it's like, that's great. You know what I mean? That's like just if I have something, I'll go see him or her, right? Different people need different mentoring styles. And one of the real parameters is, do you click with the people who work in their lab? In general, a person who's going to be a good mentor for you is going to attract people like you, that you feel identified with. Okay? So when I was rotating in graduate school at Purdue University, one of my favorite professors was a guy named Dave Krogman. And Professor Krogman and I were friends for, 40 years till he passed away. Okay? But when I rotated in his lab, I soon learned that it was what we called in those days the ganja lab. Okay? Very laid back. The work ethic was not, the strongest, most dynamic. And I was like, I would like to be in a lab where the people around me push me. I love Dr. Krogman. I'll ask him to be on my committee, but there's an alarm bell going, this is not the right fit for me. I need a lab full of really intense, egotistical, driven people, which is where I ended up, and I'm very happy with. One of the ways to determine whether someone is a good mentor is to ask them one simple question. Where are your students today? The person I went to work for said, this person has a faculty position at Texas A&M University. This person is working for Eli Lilly in Indianapolis, Indiana. This person is working for, and he went down, and out of 20 graduate students, 19 of them had responsible positions in science. One person was working for his father's company making truck pallets. Okay? That's telling you something. This person must be doing something right. Whereas, if you sit down and the person says, well, this person is now meditating on a mountain in the Himalayas, this person, is now a chef at a restaurant in New Orleans, and this person is now, selling real estate. Maybe that's telling you something about the training style and the amount of support you're getting from someone. So if you're ever going to ask a potential mentor one question, you only get one, that is the question to ask. And avoid trap number one, which is don't get hung up on what the person does. Projects come and go. Topics heat up and cool down. 10 years ago, Virginia Tech founded a bioinformatics institute. And guess what? It's now the Biocomplexity Institute. Bioinformatics went up, and and it's no longer, the cool thing.
Do you like your own laugh?
No. But what I'm saying is, I'll put it to you this way. If you work for someone who is a plant molecular biologist and you want to do work on muscular dystrophy, those skills, if you're good at them, working in molecular systems, translate. Okay? But if you do what my girlfriend in graduate school did, which was she was determined she had to work in plants, and she was working with somebody who got a job at another university. So second year graduate school, her mentor ups and leaves. There's only one other plant molecular biologist in the Department of Biology. And that person is relatively new, and their spouse works as their postdoc. It turns out that all the problems that they had at home infected the atmosphere of the lab. Okay? So yes, Livy was working in plants where she wanted to be, but man, she was miserable. And I do not have to detail how that affected my dating life. But it became, it really burned into my mind that, working in a place where you're comfortable with people you're good with and learn with, you'll do a lot better than if you just, kind of do this slog through this, oppressive thing just because so-and-so works on X. So Dr. Tu said that I do research in things called archaea. So extremophilic microorganisms, you've heard about things like deep sea vents and volcanic hot springs. So what did I do my postdoc on? Anybody read my thesis? Oh, darn. I worked on regulatory control of 3-hydroxy, 3-methylglutaril coenzyme A reductase in rat liver. You know how many microbiology courses I've taken in my life? 0. Yet I built an entire research program around working with microbes. Graduate school is not destiny. It is a preparation for the next step. It does not, and it should not, narrow your choices. It should expand them if you go about it the right way. Okay? So focus on training potential, finding a good person to give you that training, work hard, admit mistakes. You're here to learn. The only failure in life, not just graduate school, is not to learn from the experience, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? So you're trying not to do the fool me twice. Organize your time well. It is a non-renewable resource. Make sure you think in advance and make sure you've got the materials you need ready. Initiate operator-intensive, things that take a lot of time, like say growing some E. coli to transfect the next day. Set it up before you go home so they're grown instead of, okay, I transfected some E. coli at 7 a.m. and I'm going to go to Starbucks for 4 hours while they grow up to accomplish. That's not a strategy that can get you through graduate school very quickly. Try and be realistic, set a consistent pace, and kind of put it in perspective. What I like to tell graduate students is try and get one significant thing done a week. An important experiment, or you get a cell line, you make something. If you do that, that means 50 things a year. It's going to give you a little bit of vacation time. So that means over the course of 4 or 5 years in graduate school, 200 to 250 steps. That can get you a long, long way. So keep it in perspective. Focus on doing things in steps, not swinging for the fences, but also don't let lots of time go by without applying yourself to getting something, one of those steps accomplished. One of the things that almost every research project has is something that's gotta work, or the rest of it's gonna fall apart, okay? So attack that one. A lot of people go, oh my God, I don't want my project to fall apart. So what they do is they keep postponing that experiment because they don't want the disappointment. And all they're doing is making that disappointment bigger, making the consequences of that disappointment, if it were to happen, worse, right? Because they're basically throwing in more chips, right? They're investing more and more. Get to that early. And if it doesn't work, fine, then move on. That's what your advisor's for. One of the things your advisor for is to know when to cut and run. So keep moving forward on your project, and one of the things is don't fall in love with some particular operation. So suddenly, you figure out how to, transfect the Arabidopsis. And so it's like, okay, what are 50 other plants I can transfect? That's not that's not investigation. That's just, playing. Yes, you can fill notebooks with that, but you're not really getting towards a final goal. Good notebooks. Really hard. That which was not recorded did not occur. Who gets credit? Whoever, writes the history, right? Whoever it's recorded. And record the raw data, not just the process stuff, right? Because if you record the raw data and you find out later you processed the data wrong, you program the computer, it's inevitably a part of every instrument now, incorrectly, now you can process the data. Whereas if you just let the massage stuff, now you're stuck. Be opportunistic. If there's lots of dead time, try doing some other things, maybe start a little side project. Seize opportunities to write and make presentations. I was actually painfully shy many years ago. And the need to be able to communicate is really key for your recognition and your job prospects. So the best way to learn is by doing. The best way to overcome stage fright is to get up on stage and survive the experience and finally go, okay, it's going to work out. And the last thing is, no matter what bumps in the road you're going to encounter, and you will, okay, it's not a straight. It zigs and it zags, and sometimes you circle back. Remember that in graduate school, you are in $1 million playground, and someone else bought the toys. Right? One of my best friends started his own business. He is now retired. He is now a millionaire. But I remember going to visit him when he and his wife in the early days would write the checks to pay the employees and then see if they had enough money to buy their kids' shoes. If the business went under, it was not just the business, but his house would be foreclosed on, right? We're in a really special position. Someone has said, here's all this stuff to play with, right? And we're even gonna pay you to play with this stuff. So man, never, ever, ever sit there and think like it's the end of the world when something doesn't work. It isn't. It really isn't. It's an adventure. Enjoy it. And with that, the most important question, did anybody leave me pizza?
No one did.
Thank you for your attention, I know.
So we're going to take some questions for Dr. Kennelly because we're going to move Dr. Charlotte's talk to the next forum on the 13th. This is amazing thing. This is great job, man.
You should go to graduate school.
I know. Too old.
Yeah.
Never too old.
I had a question pertaining to the first half of your talk with experiences. Have you or I guess anyone else have experiences in industry or in government? Or if not, why did you just choose to stay in academia?
I worked as a lab technician after college, and